Do you know why the inhabitants of the Bay Islands speak English? It is very simple to answer this question. We simply go back before 1860, where the islands of Roatan, Utila, Guanaja, Barbareta, Elena, and Morat were British colonies, and hence the use of the language other than Spanish. Although the British Bay Islands colony remained under the command of the Queen of Great Britain and Ireland, Alexandrina Victoria, who gave the go-ahead for these islands near of the Republic of Honduras to officially pass to Central American country in 1860. The official decree to give the islands to Honduras was made in Comayagua on November 28, 1859, by Carlos Lennox Witt, squire of the Queen Victoria and the President of Honduras Republic, Francisco Cruz. This decree has 7 articles that describe each of the reasons why the British Crown transferred the islands to Honduras territorial. An attempt to resolve some disputes can be read in the foreword to the decree. The London Times indicated in an article that Britain and the United States were moderated conflict over the island of Roatan. In the end, other considerations and primary motives go the state policy for the British Crown could have led to a decision as important as giving up land won the neighboring Honduras Republic. Among the points that can be rescued among the articles of the official decree of transfer of territory is that the Honduran government would respect the rights and ways of thinking of the citizens who came to the islands as a British colony. Likewise, the treaty indicates that Honduras could not sell the Bay Islands and allow itself to be removed from its sovereignty that was granted by the Queen Victoria. The Bay Islands are now an important polynational tourism. The heritage of a language such as English has made this region more attractive to English-speaking visitors. However, we must recognize that the islanders who are from generations of British can speak Spanish and are ready to receive Hondurans and foreigners. Many historians commented that payas existed on the Bay Islands, but with the coming of Christopher Columbus on his last and fourth voyage to American continent on July 30, 1502, these Indians were captured, enslaved, and sold to other islands in the Antilles like Cuba. So the islands were uninhabited since their discovery. These islands were dominated in different short periods by English, the Dutch, and the Spanish. The language in Bay Islands until 1992 was illegal to use English in public schools of Honduras because educational was legal only in the official language of the country. Bay Islanders and North Coast English speakers maintain their capacity to read and write in English, either through private classes, through attending private lingual schools, or by sending their children to study in Belize. The former official educational policy towards the all-ethnic minorities such as Carifunas, Mosquitoes, and Bay Islanders was called Espanolization, to make them linguistically and culturally Spanish. For example, the Honduran government did not want to teach them names of Bay Islands towns in English like Calabash, Bike, Sandy Bay, Flowers Bay. The teachers had to make up names in Spanish for these places and teach them such as Bahía de Flores or Bahía Arenosa. Said retired teacher Arnold O. It was prohibited to speak any English in the school, even though many young children arrived speaking nothing else. If their parents wanted their children to learn to read and write English, they sent them to private lessons, where some other people will teach them using the Royal Reader. This used in North Coast as well. Some people sent their children to study English, where the schools were in English. In 1992, a law was passed which changed the definition of the official language of the country to include all the autochthonous language of the country, such as Pech, Mosquito, Toll, etc. This law also includes English since that is language of the Bay Islanders. In 1992, the project began a pilot project of bilingual education in 2 public kindergartens near Coxenhole and Roatan, when the National Program for Educational for Afro-Antillean and Autochthonous Ethnic Groups Hondurans was founded. Bay Islanders were included in the official program of the bilingual intercultural education. The law that funded this program represents a huge policy change for Honduras as it recognizes the richness of Honduras, past as a multi-ethnic, multicultural, and multilingual people. Even before this program began, Bay Islanders had sought methods to include English teaching for their children. For example, in French case, the parents paid for a private English teachers at schools. In Diamond Rock and few other communities, British volunteers helped to teach English classes. The bilingual intercultural educational project is authorized in the islands. It is very complicated situation because in some schools there are English speakers who speak little Spanish and there are Latinos who speak little or no English. The majority of teachers in the Bay Islands are Spanish speakers from the main island for a number of reasons, including there is no normal schools in the Bay Islands. Their parents do not accept poorly paid. English speakers in Honduras understand standard English, which they have heard since their childhood through radio, television, and church. The central government has suggested many times that the bilingual program in the islands can be Creole English. But the Bay Islanders have said in meeting after meeting that they do not want educational project in Bay Island in English. This type of teaching standard English as a second dialect requires special training for the teachers which they have not had. It would also be helpful to train them in Spanish, which has a second language, which has not happened. Intercultural education also requires teaching about Bay Island's culture, and the Spanish-speaking teachers say that they do not know anything about Bay Island's culture. There are private bilingual schools and Bay Islanders attend these. There are families who immigrate to La Ceiba for the lack of bilingual high schools in the Bay Islands. Recently, Bay Islands University has happened on the Bay Islands. The Bay Islanders also take advantage of the programs of education by correspondence courses from the US to obtain advanced training. Before it was possible to study by correspondence and receiving a high school diploma through an exam in the US. The US no longer permits foreigners who do not reside in the US to take this exam. Only recently has there been a public junior high school, senior high school, and that is only on Roatan. It has built with Raffles other projects raise money locally. These high schools offers technical degrees in business. There are no programs for adults education in the Bay Islands, even through these types of programs like completing grade schools by radio, high schools through distance educational night programs to complete elementary school. And these are common in the Spanish-speaking part of Honduras. What is BIE? In one special case, Bay Island English and can be regarded as a means of communication between English and non-English speakers on the islands themselves. The Garifuna community in Punta Gorda, Roatan. This concerns the community of Garifuna speakers in the settlement of Punta Gorda. Historically, this community has remained apart from the communities of White Black and Black BIE, retaining its own language, Arahuaca. However, intermarriage has become more frequent and the Garifuna language is in decline. Members of the Punta Gorda community use Spanish and English in addition to Garifuna, and younger speakers are no longer fluent in the ancestral language. The English in Bay Islands. The English spoken in Punta Gorda appears to differ little from other varieties of BIE. The main difference lies in the preference of the Garifuna for Spanish. The English language in the Bay Islands can be seen as an accident of the Caribbean history, a result of British ambition in the region. BIE needs therefore to be considered in relation to the many other varieties of Caribbean English, of which show the influence of prior colonization. In the dissertation following the practice of Windford in referring of basilex of the Caribbean basin as Caribbean English Creoles. In at least one respect, the sociolinguistic situation of BIE differs greatly from that of the most other CECs. Spanish, not English, is the language of the state of Honduras. Most current speakers of BIE possess at least a partial competence in the dominant language of the country. The situation in the Bay Islands is one of the bilingualism in which English is the preferred language of people of Caribbean or British descent. However, there is no similarity to the bilingualism which exists in islands such as San Lucia and Dominica. There, English is a later tradition, which is not only tending to displace the early French lexicon Creole. Bay Islanders, with the exception of the Black Caribs and the few residents of Mosquito, have always had English as their mother tongue, or such at least was the case until recently. English has itself been experiencing fierce competition from Spanish and on the Bay Islands due to the very large influx of monolingual Spanish speakers from the mainland of Honduras. This has resulted in such a dramatic demographic shift that English is now the first language of the less than half of the island's population, perhaps only about 40%. It is no longer accurate to describe the islands as English speaking, as most people under 50 are bilingual, and the youngest generation attends schools in which a larger proportion of their fellow students, a clear majority in the urban areas, are Spanish speakers. It remains to be seen to what extent the younger Spanish-speaking population will adopt English as a second language. Much may depend on the success of efforts to introduce English as a medium of instruction as distinct from English as a second language in the island's public school, which have up till now been entirely Spanish medium. There are some parallels between the situation in the Bay Island and that which exists in the small enclaves of English Creole speakers found along the Caribbean coast of Central America, in Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, and in two insular possessions of Colombia, the small island of San Andres and Providencia. In all these territories, English is in retreat, and its survival in the long term appears very uncertain. The English-speaking communities in Panama have been assimilated to the point where English Creole survives only in patches. Mainly, the outlying province of Bocas del Toro, Spanish-English bilingualism is also found in Belize, where the English Creole is experiencing increasing pressure from Spanish, despite the official status of English. A key question is the extent to which BIE shares the features of English Creoles found elsewhere in Central America, the insular Caribbean and Guyana, to the extent to Creole universal of substrate features similar to those found elsewhere can be identified. This will provide evidence for a Creole element in BIE genesis. The people who were the first inhabitants of Bay Islands has backgrounds from the Caribbean, such like Jamaica. So, they were exposed to other languages like Arawaca, a Caribbean native language, and the language from the slaves, African language, even though it is interesting that according to Elisa Warren, in her book Central American English, the Bay Island people do not consider their language a Creole, and they consider the English from Belize unintelligible. However, they present the conflection of the sound of V and the sound of W into a single phoneme. Example given, so you say that people respect each other more back then, and the speaker will say, "Yes, ma'am, they did, because you could go to a by person place and they would try you jobs that same as you bark bait." Yeah, clear. Simple! So they pronounce the word have as whole. So only by the context is possible to determine which word they are using. Another example is that the modal can is not present, but can is negative counterpart is used in the present tense. Also, they use the form them as a possessive pronoun there, but in low classes.